13-year-old Jake sweeps Boston's streets while sketching traffic patterns on a scrap paper. In a tiny apartment lit by a flickering lamp, he dreams of fixing the city's gridlock, something Harvard called impossible. When a professor dares him to prove it, everything changes. Can a street kid rewrite the rules of the road, or will the world just see a broom? Jake pressed the broom handle against the sidewalk, the bristles dragging over gum spots and crumpled receipts. Boston mornings were cold even in May, and the wind bit through his too thin jacket. He kept his head down, not out of shame, but focus. The street wasn't just dirty, it was alive. Cars curved and stopped, honked and surged. To most, it was chaos. To Jake, it was a pattern. His worn sneakers stopped near a pothole. Jake crouched, eyes scanning the flow of vehicles from the corner. His hand dipped into his pocket and pulled out a folded sheet of brown, oily paper. The back had once wrapped sandwiches from the deli near Tremont. Now it held lines, arrows, boxes. He drew another line, then paused. "Jake!" The voice came from across the intersection. His mother, Eliza, was hauling 2 heavy bags of laundry across her shoulder. One strap snapped, and a shirt spilled into the gutter. Jake bolted across. "I told you to wait for me," she said, breathing hard. "You'll get hurt running through traffic like that." He helped her gather the clothes, hands quick. "I wasn't playing," Jake said, glancing back at the paper now flapping in the breeze against the curb. "I was watching." "Watching what? Cars?" Jake hesitated, then nodded. "They're not moving right. That light over there. Every third cycle, it clogs the left turn lane. I think the backup travels 2 blocks down." Eliza gave him a tired look. "You and these patterns. Just don't let anyone see you sketching garbage again. They already talk." They climbed the stairs to their apartment 3 flights up in a building that always smelled of mildew and fried onions. Inside, Jake dropped his school bag near the couch, more cushion than structure, and set the laundry on the chipped table. Eliza rubbed her back and reached for the kettle. Jake pulled out his sketch again. The edges were damp, one corner torn. He pressed it gently, smoothing the paper over the table. Then he reached under the couch cushion and pulled out his symbol of defiance, a broken protractor with a paper clip taped to one end. "I think I can fix it, Mom," he said softly. "Fix what, baby?" "The city. Not all of it, but the way traffic moves." She smiled without humor. "First fix your math grade, then fix Boston." "I'm serious." "I know you are. That's what scares me." She poured the tea, silent for a long moment. Then quietly, "Your dad used to say things like that too." Jake looked up. He rarely asked. She rarely spoke. "He worked traffic signals," she continued, "before the accident. Always said it wasn't just wires and timers. It was rhythm, like music." Jake looked at the paper again, and suddenly it didn't feel crazy. That night, as Eliza slept in the living room, her bedroom given to him since his asthma worsened in the cold, Jake sat by the small window, flashlight in mouth, sketching over an old pizza box. He drew circles and arrows, timings, delays. He crossed out numbers, recalculated, counted cars in his head. Across town, in a wood-paneled lecture hall, Professor Simon Keller of Harvard's Department of Urban Systems pounded the chalkboard with frustration. "It's unsolvable," he barked to his graduate students. "The Boston model is too outdated. No variable covers the anomalies." "But sir," one brave student offered. What if the anomalies are the key? Then God help the fool who thinks they can solve it. Back in the apartment, Jake whispered, maybe I'm that fool. He didn't know about Keller or the model. He just knew that the buses got stuck outside his building at 7:42 every morning, and that wasn't random. The next morning, he taped his pizza box a sketch to the stairwell wall. Eliza nearly dropped her keys when she saw it. Jake, what is this? A map, my version. She stared. On a pizza box? Better than throwing it away. She shook her head, but something in her expression softened. Later that day, as he swept near the MIT-Harvard shuttle stop, he noticed a man in a suit frowning at a tablet, muttering about data delays. Jake peeked over. It was the same pattern, same mistake. His fingers twitched. Was this it? The problem they couldn't fix? He looked down at the dirt under his broom, then at the broken protractor in his pocket, and smiled. Jake stood by the bus stop on Mass Ave, broom in hand, watching the traffic snarl like it always did. But today was different. Today he wasn't just observing, he was listening. A group of students in Harvard sweatshirts stood nearby, coffee cups steaming, backpacks half-zipped. One of them held a rolled-up poster board. Another tapped a laptop, frustrated. It's still wrong, girl said. Every simulation fails at the Cambridge Junction. Jake's ears perked. Cambridge Junction? That was 3 blocks from his building. The guy next to her sighed, pushing his glasses up. Professor Keller says the model's unfixable. Too many independent variables. Not enough data continuity. Jake turned slightly, sweeping the same square twice, pretending not to hear. He said we should move on, focus on autonomous lane projection instead. Jake's fingers clenched around the broom handle. The name Keller rang in his head. Wasn't that the same guy from the newspaper who worked on Boston's citywide optimization plan? He moved closer. But we've been working on this for weeks, the girl said. We've got traffic lights failing, bus routes overlapping, and no real-time correction loop. It's a mess. Jake looked at this street, then back at her. Do you have a map? He blurted. They turned. All 3 stared at him. What? Sorry, if I could see the traffic map, I think I know where your problem is. The guy with the laptop gave a half smile. And who are you? The data fairy? Jake held up his hands. Never mind, sorry, just overheard. He stepped back, his heart pounded. Wait, the girl said. Why do you think you know? Jake hesitated, then pulled a folded piece of paper from his jacket, greasy, bent, and covered in smudged arrows and timing notes. The girl took it gently, read, looked up. Where'd you get this? I made it, watching cars. That light near Dunster, your backup start there, right? The guy snorted. That's coincidence, you guessed. But she didn't look convinced. I've walked that corridor for 6 days, Jake said. Your overflow isn't random. It echoes every 9 minutes. The pressure builds between crossings. She opened her mouth to speak. Amira, a voice called. A tall man in a navy coat walked out of the building behind them, gray at the temples, cold eyes. Jake knew immediately this was Keller. Is this the group wasting time outside with toy problems? He snapped. Amira straightened. We were discussing the junction delay, sir. With the street cleaner? Keller barked. How efficient. Jake felt the heat rise in his face. He reached to take the paper back, but Keller snatched it. Let's see what our local genius has written. His eyes scanned the sketch, then narrowed. Where did you get these numbers? I counted, Jake said, voice low. For a week. I watched patterns. Watched? Keller laughed sharply. You think this is science? Amira stepped forward. Professor, this city spends $1.8 billion a year managing traffic flow, and we're meant to believe a boy with a broken protractor and a pizza box can outthink our team? Jake didn't answer. He didn't flinch either. Keller stepped closer. Here's a challenge. Fix it in front of everyone. If you're right, I'll listen. If not, he jabbed a finger at the broom. Go back to sweeping. Jake looked at Amira. She didn't smile, but she didn't look away. He nodded once. Okay? Keller's tone turned mocking. We'll give you 1 week. 1 shot. Bring your best recycled paper. He turned and walked off. Jake stood in the cold wind, paper clutched in his fist. Behind him, Amira whispered, Don't take it personally. He does that to grad students too. Jake didn't smile. I heard something I can't ignore, he said. He walked away, not toward home, but toward the small public library across the river, the only place where he could study for free. Inside, the lights flickered overhead, but the air was warm and the desk was empty. He pulled out his pizza box, taped the broken protractor to the table, and began again. The library closed at 9. Jake stayed until 9:03. The security guard, a tired man with headphones and a limp, gave him a nod as he slipped out the side door. Jake's pizza box was folded under one arm, his backpack thudding with mismatched pencils, a busted ruler, and 3 library books on systems engineering that he barely understood. The night air hit him like a slap. Cold, damp, sharp. He crossed the river on foot, shoes thin at the heel. The city still moved, cars inching forward, tail lights flaring, buses stalled at predictable intersections. Jake paused under a flickering streetlight near Kendall Square. He dropped his backpack on the sidewalk, unrolled the pizza box against a bench, and stared. The same patterns, over and over. Congestion didn't start where they thought it did. It echoed backward. Delays from earlier lights, timing mismatches rippling through like shock waves. He knelt, pulled out twigs from his pocket. Broken from nearby trees, he'd been collecting them for days, some straight, some curved. Each one marked with a black pen, A, B, C, down to J. Tonight, they became intersections. Using his broken protractor, the paperclip still taped at the center, he began laying out angles, not precise, but consistent. He positioned a red candy wrapper to represent a stalled bus, then slowly moved a twig, labeled C 5 degrees east. The ripple stopped. Jake froze, moved it back, jam returned. Again, flow restored. His mouth dropped open, not because it worked, but because he could feel it. He wasn't solving a math problem. He was listening to a rhythm. I see it differently now, he whispered. It's not about formulas, it's movement, timing, delay lines. Behind him, footsteps echoed. He turned quickly. His mom. Eliza stood in her work uniform, windbreaker zipped to her chin, breath visible in the cold. I've been looking for you, she said, voice firm. Jake stood, brushing dirt from his knees. Sorry, I needed space. To play with trash and twigs? She asked, but there was no bite in it. Jake pointed at the pizza box. I think I found it. The pressure point? There's a delay chain starting 5 lights before anyone notices. But if you realign one, just one, it breaks the loop. She walked closer and squinting at the candy wrapper and the sticks. That makes sense to you? He nodded. It's like it speaks, not in words, but rhythm. She sat beside him on the cold bench. Jake looked down. You think I'm crazy? No, she said quietly. I think you're your father's son. He blinked. I used to hate how he'd pull over mid-drive just to count lights, she continued. Once made us late to a funeral doing that, but he said it wasn't about being on time, it was about fixing the system for the people always stuck behind. Jake swallowed. His voice cracked. Do you remember where he worked? City Signal Department. He said they never listened to his ideas, not once. Jake looked down at the twigs. Maybe they'll listen now. She reached into her pocket, pulled out a single torn glove and placed it on the bench. Don't freeze doing it, he smiled. The next morning, Jake didn't go to a school. He went to the old janitor's closet in the basement of the library, a place he'd discovered weeks ago when hiding from rain. There, under a dim yellow bulb, he laid everything out: pizza box, twigs, candy wrapper, library maps taped side by side. He drew over the cardboard with a stolen crayon. Arrows, lights, timing marks, again and again. He had no software, no simulations, just rhythm. Hours passed. He ran out of crayon, switched to a pen, ran out of paper, tore blank pages from an old library pamphlet, and then it clicked. A circular flow model, no bottleneck, just rephased timing, 3 lights adjusted, 2 turns rerouted. It wasn't just a patch, it was a rewrite. Jake leaned back, exhausted. His hands were ink-stained. His protractor was bent beyond repair. But in front of him, taped together with hope and tape and trash, was the flow. He didn't need approval. He just needed one chance. He grabbed the pizza box and headed out. Not toward home, but toward Harvard. Jake stood outside Harvard's Jefferson Hall, backpack slung low, pizza box in hand. Inside, the lecture hall buzzed with voices, students, faculty, cold coffee, and friction in the air. He took a breath. His heart pounded like a warning bell. Here goes nothing, he whispered. The doors creaked open. Heads turned. A few students blinked. One of them nudged the person beside him. Isn't that the street kid? Jake ignored them and stepped down the stairs, one slow foot at a time. At the bottom stood Professor Keller, arms crossed, eyes cold. You're late, Keller said. Jake glanced at the clock. 2 minutes passed. He stayed silent. You brought cardboard? Keller sneered. Jake knelt and opened the pizza box. Inside were twigs, bits of paper, and layers of hand-drawn diagrams taped across its surface. The room broke into muffled laughter. One student whispered, "Is this performance art?" Another chuckled, "Where's the delivery receipt?" Jake didn't flinch. He began rearranging the twigs, speaking calmly. These are intersections. Red is congestion. Blue is open flow. The junction at Cambridge backs up every 9 minutes because of a mistimed cross signal at point C. He moved a twig 5 degrees, repositioned a paper circle. This small shift breaks the loop. Here, see? Keller walked over, leaned in. And what algorithm supports this model? He asked, voice dripping with sarcasm. I didn't use an algorithm, Jake said. I used observation and timing. I listened to it. Keller scoffed. This is absurd. Traffic modeling requires computation. Real data, not candy wrappers and twigs. Jake felt heat rise to his ears. I don't have a lab, he said. I have sidewalks and a broken protractor. The laughter grew louder. Keller turned to the students. Ladies and gentlemen, behold, the future of transportation brought to you by a broom and a box of trash. Jake's fists clenched. He grabbed his diagram, pulled it closer. They laughed, he muttered, but I won't stop. The room quieted for a moment. What did you say? Keller asked. Jake stood. You said it couldn't be solved. I found a rhythm. I'm not here to impress you. I'm here because your model is failing people like my mom. People who wait on buses that never come. Who miss jobs because your system breaks. A hush fell over the hall. Amira, the grad student from before, shifted in her seat. She raised her hand. Professor, may I? Keller frowned. Proceed. Amira walked to Jake's model, looked closely. These light sequences, she said, pointing to the labels, match the City Pulse dataset. Exactly. And that 9-minute ripple. He's right. Our simulations kept failing there. Keller bristled. This is not science, he snapped. But it works, Amira said. The room stirred. Another student stepped forward. He's using flow dynamics without even knowing the math. That's kind of incredible. Jake's hands trembled. For a second, it felt like the room tilted in his favor. Then Keller slammed a folder onto the desk. I've heard enough, he said. Let's stop pretending a child with recycled cardboard just solved what teams of trained engineers could not. Jake's chest tightened. I'm not pretending, he said. Keller turned to him. You want to be taken seriously? Build a model? Use real software? Present it like a scholar, not a scavenger? Jake nodded slowly. Then give me access, he said. Just one shot. A terminal, a data set. The room held its breath. Keller smirked. You want to enter the arena? He said. Fine. 1 week, 1 shot. Fail, and you disappear. Jake swallowed hard. Amira stepped beside him. I'll help him. Keller blinked. Excuse me? I said I'll help him because you don't get to decide who belongs here. The professor's jaw tightened. Do what you want, he muttered. This circus ends in 7 days. As Jake gathered his things, his hand brushed the bent protractor in his pocket. Still broken, still working. He looked at Amira. Thank you, she smiled faintly. Don't thank me yet, she said. You've got a week to move mountains. Jake zipped up his backpack. I don't need to move mountains, he said. Just one light. The hallway outside Professor Keller's office was lined with names Jake couldn't pronounce and degrees he'd never imagined. The walls smelled like old books and polish. Quiet power. Inside, Keller sat behind a massive desk, scrolling through something on his screen. Amira stood by the window, arms crossed. She didn't look at Jake, not yet. Keller didn't look up. You asked for a shot, he said. Now you have one. Jake stepped forward, clutching the rolled pizza box under his arm. I brought my notes. No, Keller said. You'll build it from scratch, in here, on our system. Jake hesitated. I've never used your software. Then learn, Keller said flatly. You want to solve a billion-dollar problem. You'll do it our way. Amira finally spoke. At least give him access to the City Flow Simulator. Version 2. Keller clicked, then stood. You get 5 nights. The lab closes at midnight. If your model can't outperform ours by Friday, He turned fully now, eyes locked. You walk away. Permanently. Jake nodded once. I'll show you. Keller stepped closer. No more pizza boxes, no paper, no excuses. Fail and get out. Jake swallowed hard, his voice steady. I won't fail. The lab was cold and full of silence. Rows of terminals, walls of code. Jake sat at one in the corner, the screen humming like a dare. He opened the interface. Lines of symbols. None of it made sense. His fingers hovered, then dropped. He opened a tutorial video, watched for 5 minutes, paused, rewound, watched again. An hour passed, then 2. His eyes blurred, but he kept going. Midnight came fast. Amira returned, coat over her arm. You still breathing? Barely, Jake said, rubbing his temples. She pulled up a chair. I got you access to the 2019 traffic delay logs. Should help validate your flow predictions. Jake looked at her. Why are you helping me? She shrugged. You see things we don't. Might be worth listening. He nodded, then reached into his pocket and laid something on the desk. The bent protractor. Amira raised an eyebrow. You still carrying that thing? Helps me think, Jake said. Every time I feel stuck, I remember. It still works. Even broken. She looked at the twisted plastic and tape, then at him. You're not what I expected, she said. Me neither, he replied. Thursday night came faster than it should have. Jake hadn't eaten properly in 2 days. His fingers ached, but the model was forming, color-coded layers, dynamic loop timing, and at the center a visual rhythm of pressure zones built from twigs and candy wrappers, now turned into code. He ran the simulation. It crashed, ran it again. Too much congestion on phase 3. Jake slammed the keyboard. I'm out of time, he muttered. The room spun. His breath came fast. He stood, heart pounding, ready to leave. Then he saw it, a misplaced variable. One delay loop referencing the wrong node. He fixed it, ran the model again. Smooth. Buses cleared. Cars flowed. Delay time cut by 42%. He stared at the screen. It worked. He staggered back into his chair, blinking through tears. Friday morning, the lecture hall was packed. Faculty, grad students, city officials. Someone was recording on a phone. Jake stood beside a podium, hands shaking. Professor Keller stepped up. This is the final demonstration, he announced. If this so-called model fails, this conversation is over. Jake clicked. The screen lit up. The model ran. For 10 seconds, the room was silent. Then gasps. The grid moved like a wave, smooth, predictive, efficient. Amira grinned. He did it? Someone from the city council whispered. That's better than ours. Keller's face didn't move. He turned to Jake. You made this? Jake nodded. From scratch. No wrappers, no twigs, just rhythm. The professor stared, then spoke low. We'll run a full audit, but if this holds, he paused. You may have just solved the unsolvable. Jake nodded again. I told you I would. Jake sat on the floor of their apartment, legs crossed, flashlight clamped between his teeth. The room was dark except for that flickering beam, bouncing off the taped-up pizza box spread across the tile. His mom slept on the couch behind him, a blanket pulled up to her chin. Every so often, she coughed in her sleep. Jake paused each time, listening, then scribbled something new on the margin of a recycled delivery flyer. He had no textbooks, no high-speed laptop, but he had time, pressure, and a model in his head that wouldn't let go. The protractor lay beside him, bent, taped, stained, but it still traced angles like it was born for this. "I won't give up," he whispered. Each night that week, he worked until dawn. At the university lab, he copied code syntax by watching YouTube tutorials at half volume. When the terminals froze, he rebooted them himself. When the datasets lagged, he hand-calculated delays. He didn't tell Amira everything. She was already doing too much, bringing him USB drives, sneaking him extra hours in the lab. But he kept the most important thing secret. He was building 2 models, one for them and one for himself. The official version matched Harvard's rules. The second one, his real one, was built in his mind, then scribbled on scraps of cardboard at night. It was faster, smoother, less bound by code and more by instinct. Friday, 2 a.m. Jake hunched over the kitchen table, sweat on his neck. He rubbed his eyes. His vision pulsed with numbers. The pressure point at point C had one flaw. No matter how he phased it, delays rebounded at T-junction F every 12 minutes. He laid out 3 pencils, a bottle cap, and a crusted spoon. He ran the movement again, tracing it with the finger. Red, red, yellow, flow, flow. Then stopped. His jaw tightened. He reached for the bent protractor, traced a curve, shifted it 3 degrees. Tried again. This time, flow. It held. 12 minutes passed, no backup. Jake stood so fast, he knocked over his chair. He wanted to yell, wake his mom, call Amira, tell someone, but he didn't. He sat back down, rewrote the entire sequence. By morning, it was done. The real model, the one that felt alive. When Eliza stirred from the couch and sat up, rubbing her eyes, she saw him asleep at the table, ink on his hands, cardboard under his cheek. The bent protractor still gripped in one fist like a talisman. She walked over, touched his shoulder gently. Jake blinked. "You working all night again?" she asked softly. He nodded, voice dry. "I think I found it." She looked down at the mess. To her, it was just more the scribbles. To him, it was the city, moving, breathing. "You're doing this for us?" she asked. Jake hesitated. "No," he said. "I'm doing it for Dad, but I'm carrying you both with me." She smiled. No words, just pride, quiet and full. That night, back at the university lab, Jake slipped the final code into the simulation window. The system blinked, and then it ran. He watched it play like music. No jams, no shock waves, just motion. Professor Keller would see it soon. The board, the city, everyone. But Jake didn't care about applause. He looked down at his worn notes, the broken pencil stub beside the keyboard, the bent protractor taped to his notebook's spine. Symbols of every reason he should have failed, but didn't. He leaned back, exhaled. It wasn't just working, it was art. The lecture hall at Harvard buzzed louder than usual. Word had spread. City planners, faculty, reporters, even students from MIT packed the back rows, some standing along the walls. Jake stood near the front, his palms sweaty, staring at the giant screen behind him. His worn notebook was tucked under one arm, the bent protractor taped across the cover like a badge. Amira hovered nearby, holding a tablet with backup files. She leaned in. "You ready?" Jake nodded, barely. Professor Keller walked in, flanked by 2 faculty chairs and a city traffic commissioner. He didn't smile, didn't nod, just took his seat, arms folded. Amira whispered, "He's expecting you to stumble." Jake exhaled. Then he's not watching close enough. The lights dimmed. The screen came alive. Jake stepped forward. "My name is Jake Alvarez," he said, voice steady. "I don't have degrees or titles. I sweep streets. But for the past 4 weeks, I've been studying your traffic system." A few chuckles from the back. One person coughed loudly, trying to hide a laugh. Jake didn't flinch. He clicked. The model appeared. A 3D map of downtown Boston, glowing with colored flow lines, red, yellow, green, intersections pulsed with data. Jake pointed. "This is where your system fails, junction C. And this," he moved a marker, "is where the failure begins, 5 signals earlier, not where the backup ends, but where it begins." The animation ran. The grid moved like a living thing. By adjusting phase delay by 3 seconds here and reassigning left turn flow at point F, we reduce congestion ripple by 42%. Murmurs now, louder. He continued, "Your model focuses on reaction. Mine focuses on rhythm." Amira tapped her screen. The simulation replayed. Faster, cleaner. "Same data," she said. "Different flow." Someone from the city department leaned forward. "That's not in our current projections." Jake turned to them. "I know. I built it with candy wrappers and cardboard. But the math? It's real." Keller stood. "Mr. Alvarez," he said slowly, "are you suggesting that a street sweeper found what my entire department missed?" Jake didn't answer immediately. He held up his notebook. The cover cracked, the pages soft at the edges. "No," he said. "I'm suggesting I saw what others overlooked. Not because I'm smarter, but because I had to live in the jam you designed." Silence. Then clapping. It started near the back, a student in a hoodie, then 2 more. Then the sound rolled forward, like the traffic waves Jake had just unraveled. Keller didn't clap, but he didn't speak either. Amira turned to Jake, stunned. "I never saw that coming." Jake looked at the screen. The colors still dancing. "I did." Later that day, in the hallway outside, Jake leaned against a vending machine, rubbing his eyes. Amira handed him a granola bar. "You realize what you just did, right?" she asked. "I think so," she grinned. "Half the city's about to ask for your model." "I'm gonna need more cardboard," he joked. Just then, Eliza walked in, still in her uniform, hair tied back, holding a small brown bag. Jake straightened. "Mom?" She smiled. "I brought you lunch and maybe a future." He opened the bag. Inside, a new notebook, spiral bound, clean pages, taped to the cover, his old protractor, still bent, still his. Jake stared at it, then hugged her tight. "This is just the beginning," he whispered. And somewhere behind him, the city kept moving. This time, to a rhythm only Jake had heard. The classroom was empty except for the sound of chalk tapping the board. Jake stood alone, drawing intersections on the surface. His new notebook lay open on the desk, its first page filled with equations. Taped to the corner, his old bent protractor. He heard the door creak behind him. Amira stepped in, a folder in her hands. "They're calling it the Alvarez Flow model," she said. "City's running a pilot next week." Jake didn't turn. He kept drawing. That's not why I did it. She stepped closer. Then why? Jake paused, set the chalk down. His voice was soft. When I was 8, my dad called me out onto the balcony, said he had something to show me. He picked up his notebook and opened to the second page. An old sketch, worn from being traced so many times. He pointed at the street, told me to watch the light change, then the cars, then the way the buses stalled behind the bakery corner. Jake looked at her now. He said traffic talks, and we just don't listen. Amira sat in the front row, silent. Jake continued. A week later, he was gone. Amira blinked. I'm sorry. Jake nodded, jaw tight. They said it was mechanical failure, but I read the report when I got older. The system delayed a left turn signal. He was hit in the intersection. He walked to the desk, picked up the protractor. My mom always said he died trying to fix something broken. He looked up. I guess I've been trying to finish that. The door opened again. Eliza stood there, still in her work shoes, holding a folded envelope. They sent this, she said, walking in slowly. Jake took it. His hands trembled. Inside, an official letter from the city. Offer to join a youth advisory panel on infrastructure. A small stipend. Part-time, but real. Jake sat on the desk's edge, scanning it twice. I didn't think they'd actually want me. Eliza smiled gently. They don't just want you, baby. They need you. He exhaled. Amira walked up and tapped the notebook. What page is it on? She asked. Jake opened to the last one. It wasn't math. It was a drawing. A street corner, a red light, a man standing beside a little boy, pointing to the sky. Amira read the caption he'd written beneath it. This is for him? Jake didn't say anything. He didn't have to. Eliza brushed hand along the notebook's edge, then looked at the taped protractor. You keep that thing like it's gold. Jake smiled. It's the only thing I didn't throw away after the crash. There was a pause, then Eliza said, You're making him proud. Jake looked up. Was he really that good? Eliza laughed once. He was stubborn, never finished college, but he'd draw diagrams on napkins during dinner. You've got his mind and his fire. Jake closed the notebook and held it close. Then maybe it's not over. Amira nodded slowly. No, it's just beginning. Jake walked to the board and circled the next point of failure he planned to solve. Intersection H, the South Boston corridor. He turned to both women. I'm going there tomorrow, not to watch cars, to listen. Eliza smiled, holding back tears. Take your notebook. Jake nodded, and the protractor. He slid it into the spine and closed the cover. Still bent, still perfect. Jake pushed open the door to room 3B. The lab space Amira had quietly given him access to. But this time, the lights were off. The screen was gone. His login credentials no longer worked. He tried again. Access denied. He turned, heart pounding, just as Professor Keller stepped from the shadows of the hallway. You've had your moment, Keller said coldly. Now it's over. Jake stood frozen. What do you mean? The lab is reserved for students. You're not one. Jake's voice rose. But the pilot's launching next week. They're using my model. Keller didn't flinch. They're using a revised version, checked, cleaned, and submitted by licensed faculty. You made noise. You sparked interest. That's all. Jake took a step closer. You're trying to erase me. Keller leaned in. You were a story, an impressive one, but this is a university, not a street corner. Jake's hands clenched at his sides. I earned this. Keller turned away. Not in the way that matters. Jake stared at the empty lab, then slowly walked back into the hallway, gripping his notebook tightly, still taped, still marked with every sketch, every breakthrough, still holding his bent protractor inside. He walked down the hall and found Amira in the common room, typing fast on her laptop. They locked me out, he said quietly. She stopped. What? Keller said it's over, that they're using a cleaned-up version of the model, and I'm not part of it. She stood fast, knocking her chair back. No, he doesn't get to do that. Jake looked away. I don't belong here. I knew it wouldn't last. Amira grabbed his arm. Don't say that. He pulled free, voice cracking. I gave everything I had. My nights, my hands, my head. And the minute it worked, they took it. He held up the notebook. This is all I've got left. Silence. Then a voice behind them. I disagree. They turned. A tall woman in a gray blazer stepped into the room. City Commissioner Harris. Jake had seen her once at the presentation. She walked over, eyeing the notebook. I came to see the author of the original flow model, she said. Imagine my surprise when I was told he wasn't a student here. Amira stepped forward. This is Jake. He built the model. Keller tried to push him out. Harris nodded slowly. And that's why I'm here. Jake's eyes narrowed. You believe me? I believe the data, but more than that, I believe in fairness. She reached into her bag, pulled out a printed memo, and handed it to Jake. We're establishing an official advisory seat for public innovation contributors. You'll have a voice, with or without this school's blessing. Jake stared at the page. His name was printed at the top. Advisor, Jacob Alvarez, Community Flow Consultant. I don't know what to say, he whispered. Harris smiled. Say you will keep building. Amira grinned beside him. Because we're just getting started. Jake looked down at the bent protractor now resting in his palm, the same one they all laughed at, the same one he traced his father's dream with. They can lock the lab, he said quietly, but they can't erase me. He looked back toward the hallway, the doors Keller had slammed shut, and turned the other way, toward the city, toward the street, toward the rhythm he never stopped hearing. The community center buzzed with voices, students, professors, engineers, and city officials, all packed into one space. Folding chairs squeaked against linoleum. Someone adjusted a mic that kept humming. Jake stood in the wings, notebook in hand, spiral-bound but still taped at the corners. His bent protractor peeked from inside, its metal arm catching the overhead light. He took a breath. Amira appeared beside him, holding a slim black laptop. They're expecting Keller's version, she whispered. Polished, sanitized. Jake looked at her. Are we really doing this? She nodded. You built it. You show it. If they doubt you, I'll prove it. The announcer stepped up to the mic. Today's update on the South Corridor Flow Reform Model will be presented by Amira Chen with field research by Jacob Alvarez. Scattered murmurs. Jake heard the disbelief in them. The street kid? Didn't he get booted? He stepped forward anyway. The projector lit the screen behind him. Jake adjusted the mic. Most of you know the model by now. What you might not know is where it came from. He clicked. Slide 1, a sketch, drawn in pen, smudged but clear. a hand-drawn loop system, timed lights, pressure ripples, volume spikes. He held up the original notebook. This is where it started, not with software, with sidewalks, with counting cars by hand and mapping them on a scrap paper. Keller stood in the back, arms crossed. A few professors raised eyebrows. Jake didn't blink. He flipped to the next slide. This is the unedited code. My first pass. I didn't have a license. I used public data and built the logic by watching traffic every morning. He turned to the audience. Everything Keller's version corrects was already here. Keller stepped forward. That's a bold claim. Jake met his eyes. It's not a claim, it's a fact. Amira moved to the mic, holding up a USB. This drive contains Jake's model saved with timestamps. These files predate any university revisions. And here, she clicked again. Slide 3, side-by-side output of both simulations. Jake's model, 42% reduction in congestion, 27% increase in fuel efficiency, 19% decrease in commuter delay. Keller's version, 39%, 24%, 17%. The numbers were close, but Jake's were better and the room felt it. Silence. Then a ripple of whispers. The city commissioner stood. I've reviewed these files, she said. All metadata confirms the model originated with Mr. Alvarez. This notebook, she held it up carefully, has more insight than 3 software packages combined. Jake swallowed. This is my work, he said. I didn't come from the right place. I didn't say the right words, but I built this because I had to. Keller opened his mouth, but someone else beat him to it. A transportation planner near the front raised her hand. I commute through South Boston every day. Whatever model fixed that corridor, thank you. She looked at Jake directly. Doesn't matter what jacket you wear. More hands raised, more nods. Keller slowly sat back down. Jake turned to Amira. They can't deny it now. She smiled. They never could. They just tried. Afterward, as the room emptied, Jake stood near the folding chairs, running a finger along the frayed edge of his notebook. His mom approached, tears in her eyes, holding a laminated print of the final simulation map. You did it, baby, she said. You brought it all the way home. Jake looked down at the old protractor, still taped inside the back cover, still bent, still right. I did it for him, he said softly. But today, I think I did it for me too. Jake sat alone on the steps outside the university's engineering hall. The late afternoon sun lit the pavement, warm against his back. His notebook rested on his knees, cover worn, pages curled, the bent protractor, still taped inside like a scar, he chose to keep. He ran his thumb along the edge of a page filled with notes from the corridor pilot. Every line was his, every fix a part of him. But still, no one from Harvard had called, no seat, no enrollment, no offer, just talents. Then footsteps approached, measured, confident. He looked up. Commissioner Harris. She stopped in front of him, holding a leather folder. You're hard to track down when you're not fighting a system. Jake gave a faint smile. Maybe I've learned to enjoy the quiet. She sat beside him, flipping open the folder. This came across my desk today. Jake leaned in. Inside was a letter with the Harvard crest, his name printed in bold at the top. Conditional admission, Harris said. Urban Systems and Planning, sponsored scholarship, fall term. Jake blinked. This is real? As real as the traffic you just reprogrammed. His hands trembled as he took the folder. I thought they'd never let me in. Harris looked at him. You didn't wait for permission before. Why start now? He laughed once, eyes glassy. Because it's different when the doors open. A voice called from across the plaza. Jake! Amira jogged toward them, holding 2 iced coffees and a sheet of paper flapping in the breeze. I found you, she said, handing him a cup. And guess what? They're naming the model after you. Officially, on the city website, the Alvarez Flow Protocol. Jake stared down at the folder in one hand, the coffee in the other. Is this actually happening? Amira sat beside him. You changed the system, Jake. Not from inside, from the sidewalk. Harris rose to leave but paused. One more thing, she said. Jake stood, notebook still in his grip. Yes, ma'am. She reached into her bag and pulled out a small box. Inside, an engraved brass protractor, sleek, new. His name etched along the edge. For what you built with a broken one. Jake swallowed hard. I don't know if I can use it. Harris smiled. Then carry it beside the old one. Both earned their place. As she walked away, Jake sat again, silent. Amira leaned closer. You okay? He opened his notebook, touched the taped plastic. Part of me doesn't believe it, he said, that someone actually sees me now. Amira nudged him. We always saw you. The problem was getting them to look. A breeze turned the page. Jake looked at the blank sheet. I guess now I have to write what comes next. She stood. You're not writing it alone? He stood too. I still don't know what I'm doing. Amira grinned. None of us do. We just pretend better. They walked toward the quad. Jake paused once, pulling the new protractor from the box and slipping it into his notebook right beside the bent one, side by side, still different, still his. The sun poured through the tall windows of the Harvard Hall rotunda, casting soft gold across rows of folding chairs. Velvet ropes lined the carpeted aisle. A polished wooden podium stood beneath the university crest. Jake stood just beyond the curtain, tugging nervously at his borrowed dress shirt. It was a little too big, cuffs rolled. His old notebook, edges worn, pages curled, was tucked under one arm, the bent protractor still taped to the back. Amira adjusted his collar and handed him a folded slip of paper. They'll call your name in 3 minutes, she said. You're the last speaker. Jake laughed quietly. Of course I am. You okay? He hesitated. Everyone out there knows theorems I haven't even heard of. I still Google how to calculate flow coefficients. She smiled. Jake, you are the coefficient. He opened the notebook. On the inside cover was a note in his mom's handwriting. You always belonged, you just had to be seen. The curtain parted. The announcer's voice rang out. And now, our final honoree, Jacob Alvarez, recipient of the Founders Scholarship and recognized contributor to the Alvarez Flow Protocol. Applause rolled across the room. Jake stepped forward, notebook in hand. Flashes sparked from phones. Faculty stood, some with crossed arms, others with faint smiles. He reached the podium and leaned in. My name is Jake Alvarez, he began, voice low but steady. Until a few months ago, I was sweeping the sidewalks outside this building. He paused. I didn't come from a lab or a prep school. I came from watching my mom wake up at 5 a.m. every day to clean offices no one thanked her for. He held up the notebook. This is where I kept everything: sketches, notes, traffic patterns drawn on pizza boxes and flyers. This, he tapped the bent protractor, was my only tool. Laughter rippled softly, warm. He took a breath. When my father died in a traffic accident, I didn't understand why. Years later, I found the data that proved the system failed him. Jake's voice cracked slightly, so I fixed it. Not because I was trained to, but because I had to. He looked around the room. You gave me a scholarship, but you didn't just fund my education, you validated my voice. He closed the notebook gently. I'll never stop listening to the rhythms no one else hears, because I know what it's like to be part of a system that overlooks people like me. The applause this time was louder, sustained. As Jake stepped down, Commissioner Harris stood in the front row, nodding. Behind her, Eliza wiped her eyes, hands pressed together as if holding something sacred. Later that evening, back in their apartment, a small crowd gathered: neighbors, old teachers, co-workers from the street department, plastic cups, store-bought cake, a cardboard banner taped across the wall. "We're proud of you, Jake." Eliza raised a glass. "To my son," she said, voice trembling, "who taught the whole city something, but never stopped teaching me too." Jake smiled through the noise, retreating for a moment into the hallway. He sat on the floor with his notebook across his lap. He opened to the first page, the original sketch, the one that changed everything. He traced the lines with his finger, then slowly reached into his pocket and pulled out the new engraved brass protractor. He slid it beside the old one, side by side, one bent, one shining. He closed the book and whispered, "I did it for us." 6 months later, the city moved differently. The morning chaos near South Station? Gone. Buses ran smoother, lights adjusted in real time. Fewer horns, fewer sirens. People noticed, even if they didn't know why. But Jake knew. He stood on the overpass above the Seaport Junction, notebook in hand, watching traffic roll like water. The same notebook, same duct tape along the spine. The bent protractor now rested between the pages, worn but always within reach. Amira joined him, holding a tablet showing live analytics. 72% drop in signal overflow since we started, she said, scrolling. "It's working." Jake nodded, eyes on the road below. "Not just numbers," he said. "I see it." They walked down to the community center where kids were building tiny traffic systems with Legos. A new workshop had opened under Jake's name: free weekend programs in traffic design, coding, and systems thinking. A boy with a yellow hoodie called out, "Mr. Jake, I made a roundabout that clears in 6 seconds. Jake knelt beside him. "Show me." The boy spun the little cars through a loop. They didn't stall. Jake grinned. "You just beat my record." Eliza stood at the back of the room, arms folded, a proud smile on her face. She caught Jake's eye and gave a small nod. Afterward, as they walked toward the bus stop, a woman in scrubs tapped Jake's shoulder. "Excuse me," she said. "You're the kid who fixed Dorchester Avenue, right?" Jake looked surprised. "Yes, ma'am." She smiled, eyes tired but grateful. "Before, it took me 50 minutes to get to work. Now, 22. You gave me time with my kids again." Jake blinked, humbled. "I'm glad it helped." She touched his arm. You changed our lives." At the next city council meeting, Jake sat quietly at the back. He didn't wear a suit, just his hoodie and jeans, notebook on his lap. Commissioner Harris presented the quarterly report. "The Alvarez Flow Protocol is now integrated in 14 districts," she said. "Accident rates are down, fuel use is down, community trust up." A councilman raised a question. "Are we really going to keep calling it a protocol based on a teenager's drawings?" She turned to him. "It's not based on drawings," she said. "It's based on vision. And it works." That night, Jake returned to the sidewalk outside his old building. The same crack in the curb, the same flickering street lamp. But this time, the bus rolled through on time. No jam, no backup. He sat on the stoop, notebook open. A little girl walked by, holding her dad's hand. "That's the boy from the news," she whispered. Jake smiled. Just then Amira called. "Guess what?" she said. "Chicago wants a trial run." Jake laughed. "They don't even know me. They know your rhythm." He closed his notebook gently. Inside, between the pages, was a new sketch, more refined, but drawn the same way. Still hand done, still alive. Eliza peeked through the window upstairs and waved. He waved back, then turned toward the street again. "This is for them," he whispered. "All of them." The traffic flowed, the lights shifted, and for once the system worked because someone who had been overlooked refused to look away. The rooftop was quiet, just wind, soft footsteps, and the distant hum of Boston below. Jake sat on the ledge with his legs crossed, notebook open on his lap, pages fluttering in the breeze. The old bent protractor rested on top, still taped, still part of the story. He looked out over the city. The traffic flowed smoothly beneath him, like veins in a living body finally in sync with itself. Behind him, Eliza climbed the final step, carrying a small box. "You left this on the kitchen table," she said, handing it over. Jake opened it. Inside was his father's old city signal badge, faded metal, scratched from wear. "He'd want you to have it," she said softly. Jake nodded, eyes locked on the badge. "I still remember him pointing at that intersection," he whispered. "Said the system was broken. I thought he meant the traffic." Eliza smiled. "He meant the way they listened." Jake closed the box gently. He was right. Amira joined them a moment later, out of breath from the climb. "They confirmed it," she said. "You're giving the opening keynote next spring." Jake blinked. "Me?" "You," she said. "They want you to speak to the new class. Theme is innovation. From the margins." Jake gave a half laugh. "I'm not sure what to say." Amira nudged his shoulder. "Say what you lived." He looked down at the notebook, its spine now reinforced, but still holding every sketch from the first light he ever studied to the latest redesign of the Logan Airport corridor. "Is it really enough?" he asked quietly. "A few lines in a notebook? A recycled box? One broken tool?" Amira crouched beside him. "You changed a city, Jake, and maybe more. You've shown us the way." He closed the notebook and held it in both hands. "I keep thinking about the kids in that workshop, the ones drawing roundabouts out of the cereal boxes." Eliza leaned on the rail, smiling. "You were one of them." Jake stood, notebook still in hand. "I want to build something bigger," he said. "Not just models, programs, fellowships, a place for people like me, kids with questions and no credentials, observers, listeners." He turned to both women. This can't end with me. Amira tilted her head. Then what comes next? Jake glanced toward the skyline, then back to the notebook. I want to rewrite the system that said I didn't belong, make room for the ones still sweeping sidewalks with equations in their heads. He tucked the bent protractor inside the front cover and tied the notebook shut with a rubber band. This is just the start. Eliza wiped a tear from her cheek. I wish your father could see you now. Jake smiled. He does. Every time a light turns green at the right second. Every time someone makes it home without wading through a broken loop. The sun dipped lower. The city lights began to flicker on, one by one. In rhythm, Jake turned toward the stairs, his notebook under his arm, the badge in his pocket, and a plan forming in his mind. As they walked down together, Amira asked, "You think they'll listen?" Jake didn't stop. "They will." He looked back over his shoulder, eyes sharp, voice calm. Because talent isn't where you sweep. He paused. It's where you dare to look.